In this video, we're going to begin the study of Lesson 5 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Latin Grammar 1 course. In our last lesson, we studied different kinds of nouns, and in this lesson, we really continue that study. But as you can see, the title reads Varia Adjectivorum Genera, which means various kinds of adjectives. One thing that's important to note here is when we use the word adjective, we're not speaking strictly of adjective nouns. Okay, what we mean by the term adjective in English is usually a quality descriptive term that modifies a noun, like red, happy, cold, soft, and so on. When we use the term adjective in Latin grammar, sometimes we do mean an adjective noun in the sense as we use the term in English. But there are also times when by adjective, what we mean is a word that can be used to modify a substantive noun, or a word that can be used in combination with a substantive noun. So the word adjective here in Lesson 5 has a little bit different meaning than the word is normally used in grammar classes. So just make sure you make note of that. It's written and explained in the lesson clearly, so you can check that out and make sure you remember that as you study this lesson. This is a very long lesson. Lesson 5 has 23 or 24 points that need to be discussed. So we're going to break this down into, I think I plan to do 7 videos for Lesson 5, and we'll take it piece by piece and make it simple for you to study. Okay, so this video will be part 1 in Lesson 5 on the various kinds or classes of adjectives. And what we're going to be studying in part 1 here is interrogative nouns. Interrogative nouns. So what we'll do is we'll walk through the Latin. Remember, in this Latin grammar course, we're studying the Latin grammar written by Emmanuel Alvarez, the Jesuit schoolmaster in the 16th century, in order to constantly prove that our teaching in this class is exactly the same teaching as was given among the Catholic schools of the 15 and 1600s, when Latin was actively in use and taught by the wisest and best schoolmasters. We're going to always make sure that we're reading directly out of the text of Alvarez to keep ourselves accountable to that historic Latin grammar teaching in the Catholic tradition. So we're always going to stick to the Latin text, and any time in a lesson that you see Latin rules or Latin definitions, those are the exact Latin words of Emmanuel Alvarez. And I can prove that by showing you the books that I'm drawing this material from. My work in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy is that I simply try to republish it so it's easier to use, because the old books are very difficult to read. In fact, the old books were rarely ever intended to be seen by students. So they were written for expert teachers and were very difficult to understand. What I do is I try to make it directly accessible to students, and I translate everything so that students learning the language can study in self-paced online courses. So with that behind us, let's get into part 1 of Lesson 5, the various kinds of adjectives. And the first group we're going to look at are interrogative nouns. All right, so let's look at the first Latin definition that Alvarez gives us. Nomen interrogativum est quo de re aliqua querimus, ut quis, uter, quantus. Nomen interrogativum est quo de re aliqua querimus, ut quis, uter, quantus. translation is nomen interrogativum, an interrogative noun. An interrogative noun is that which concerning something, de re aliqua, concerning something we ask a question. Okay, so an interrogative noun is that which concerning something we ask a question, such as quis, which means who, uter, which means which, or quantus, which means how much. Okay, so nomen interrogativum, an interrogative noun, is a noun that introduces a question, a noun by which we ask about something. All right? And we're given 3 examples here. Quis, which means who, uter, which means which, and quantus, which means how much. 3 examples. In definitions 2 and 3, we're simply going to look at 2 different kinds of interrogative nouns. All right? The first one is interrogativum substantiae, and the second is interrogativum accidentis. So very simple, an interrogative noun is a noun by which we ask about something, a noun that introduces a question, all right? And you can see, as I said, this word adjective does not refer, and even the word noun here does not simply refer to a substantive noun or an adjective noun. But here, the interrogative nouns we're looking at are actually, quis is a pronoun, okay? So we have to be flexible with the use of this term adjective in this lesson. Rule number 2, interrogativum substantiae est cui respondemus per nomen substantivum vel per pronomen demonstrativum ut quis, que, quod, uter, utra, utrum. I'll read that one more time in Latin. Interrogativum substantiae est cui respondemus per nomen substantivum vel per pronomen demonstrativum ut quis, que, quod, semicolon in there, uter, utra, utrum. This rule translates as an interrogative noun of substance, and this is a good example of an adjective noun that has a substantive understood. Here in definition 1, you see we refer to an interrogativum nomen, an interrogative noun. Here we have the adjective interrogativum, but we don't express the substantive because it's already understood in this lesson from rule number 1. So there's an example of what we learned in lesson 4 when we studied adjective nouns. So interrogativum substantiae, an interrogative noun, the word nomen is understood and not expressed. Interrogativum substantiae, an interrogative noun of substance. An interrogative noun of substance is that to which we respond by a nomen substantivum, a substantive noun, or vel, or by, per, a pronoun demonstrative, a demonstrative pronoun. And I'll explain what that is in a minute. An interrogative noun of substance is that to which we respond by a substantive noun or by a demonstrative pronoun, such as quis, que, quod. This means who or what. Uter, utra, utrum. These are the three different genders of the noun which. Okay? So this is masculine form, feminine form, neuter form, masculine form, feminine form, neuter form. So if you ask a question and expect a masculine response, you would use the masculine form of the interrogative noun. All right? If you asked a question and expected a feminine response, you would use the feminine form of the interrogative noun. So to go back to this definition, an interrogative noun of substance, to put it very simply, is a question which is answered with a substantive noun. Okay? An interrogative noun of substance is a noun that introduces a question where the answer is expected to be a substantive noun. Okay? That's why the rule says an interrogative of substance is that to which we respond by a substantive noun. Very simple. And then it says, or by a demonstrative pronoun. A demonstrative pronoun is, is one that points something out or that shows something. Very simply, you can think of demonstrative pronouns as the pronouns this or that. Something you point at and say that, or something you point at and say this. That's a demonstrative pronoun, okay? So an interrogative noun of substance is a noun by which we ask about something, but which we respond to with a substantive noun or with a demonstrative pronoun, such as the interrogative nouns quis, que, quod, uter, utra, utrum. That's our second definition. And we're going to look at some examples later on, so we'll make this clearer then. Thirdly, if we understand what an interrogative of substance is, we can understand Rule 3, what is an interrogative of accident? An accident is a quality or attribute of something. So the first kind of question, the first kind of noun is an interrogative noun of substance, where we ask about something and we expect an answer that's a substance or a substantive noun. An interrogative of accident is a question that we ask, a noun that we use to ask a question where the answer is expected to be some quality. All right, and we'll see that. We'll see that in the examples. So, interrogativum accidentis est cui respondemos per nomen adjectivum, not substantivum, adjectivum. Ut quantus, qualis, quot, quotus, cuius, cuia, cuium, cuias. Okay? An interrogative noun of accident is that to which we respond by an adjective noun. An interrogative of accident is a noun to which we respond by an adjective noun. An interrogative of substance is a noun to which we respond by a substantive noun. An interrogative of accident is one to which we respond by an adjective noun. So you should understand the difference between these. And remember, these are the two kinds of interrogative nouns. So in Rule 1, we're introduced to interrogative noun in general. And then in Rule 2 and 3, we're introduced to the two kinds of interrogative nouns. That's the content of this first part of our study of Lesson 5. Now, we have the definitions here, but to really understand the things it's helpful always to look at examples. And thankfully, Alvarez provides us with a treasury of examples to prove his teaching. So, for examples, an interrogative of substance is one to which we respond with a substantive noun. And one of the examples that's given is quis, which I said is translated as who in English. So the first example of an interrogative noun of substance would be quis, who, quis. And here we have an example where we use the interrogative noun of substance, quis. We have the question, quis hic loquitur? Quis hic loquitur? That translates as, who says this? Or who said this? Quis hic loquitur? So this is a question using an interrogative noun of substance, and therefore we know that the answer is going to be either a substantive noun or a demonstrative pronoun. And when we look at the example, we see that the first answer that Alvarez gives us is the name Davus. And let's just say Davus means David, okay? Davus. Davus is a substantive noun. So, who said this? Davus said this. Davus is a substantive noun. The response is a substantive noun, which proves that quis is an interrogative of substance that asks a question to be answered with a substantive noun. Okay? The second response that Alvarez gives us is the demonstrative pronoun ille, which means he or that. It means he, but the idea is that you're referring to someone over there. He, ille, that man. So who said this? Quis hic loquitur? Ille. This interrogative noun of substance can be answered with a demonstrative pronoun. Okay? That's what's being shown here. So Alvarez gives us an example of a question using an interrogative noun of substance, and then he shows us how it can be answered with a substantive noun like davus, or with a demonstrative pronoun like ille. All right, so quis is an example right here of an interrogative noun of substance. Next, Alvarez gives us the question, qualis fuit Hector? Qualis fuit Hector? And you can see that qualis is one of the examples that he gave of an interrogative noun of accident. All right, qualis translates into English as what kind. All right, what kind? So an interrogative of accident. And when we look at the sentence, the example that's given to us, qualis fuit Hector, it translates as what kind of man is understood here, what kind of man was Hector? Hector was the famous Trojan who fought against Aeneas and the Greeks, against Achilles and the Greeks in the Iliad. Hector was a famous Trojan warrior. So we ask, what kind of man was Hector? And the answer that's given, the first answer is fortis. Fortis. Fortis is an adjective noun that means strong. Fortis. So an interrogative of accident is a noun which asks a question to be answered by an adjective noun. And we see the noun qualis introduces a question that's answered by the adjective fortis, strong. The second example that Alvarez gives us is magnanimous, which is just another adjective that means courageous. Okay, so Hector was fortis, strong. Hector was magnanimus, magnanimous, courageous. All right. So we have an example of an interrogative noun of substance in quis, and we have an example of an interrogative noun of accident in qualis. The interrogative noun of substance is answered with a substantive noun or with a demonstrative pronoun. An interrogative noun of accident is answered with an adjective noun. Okay? That's our first example of an interrogative noun of accident. And Alvarez gives us a bunch more, which we might as well look at. Second, he gives us Quantus, which we see right here. Okay, the first one he lists. The interrogative of accident, Quantus, which means how much. Okay? The reason I say how much, again, you have to make sure, if you want to understand these courses, you have to study all the classical liberal arts, because in the classical liberal arts we distinguish magnitudes from multitudes. Multitudes are studied in arithmetic. Magnitudes are studied in geometry, because these are two divisions of ideas, two divisions of quantity, multitude and magnitude. When we get into grammar, because the ancients knew this philosophy and knew the classical liberal arts, the grammar serves the classical liberal arts. The grammar serves what you learn in classical reasoning and classical mathematics. Okay, so in order to understand the grammar, you need to also study the other subjects. You need to study grammar, reasoning, and rhetoric. You need to study the 4 arts of the quadrivium, the 4 mathematical arts. You need to study classical philosophy, and so on. Because all of those sciences and arts are going to be found in the language and how the language works in the classical languages. Okay, so when we say quantus, we're referring to magnitudes. How much, how great, how small. All right? And we'll see that by the answers. Quantus is an interrogative noun of accident. It asks a question that's going to be answered with an adjective noun. But the adjective nouns that are going to be used to answer the question quantus are going to be adjective nouns that describe magnitudes. All right? So if we ask quantus, how much, how great, typical answers will be magnus, which means great, great in size, magnus, or parvus, which means small in size, parvus, magnus et parvus. These adjectives speak of magnitudes, and they answer the question quantus, how much. Also, longus, which means long, longus. And brevis, brevis, short, longus, brevis. Magnus, parvus, longus, brevis. All right? These are adjectives that describe magnitudes, and they answer the question quantus, which is an interrogative noun of accident. Okay? Next we have quote, which is given as one of our examples. Quote asks a question about multitudes. It asks the question, how many? How many? It's an interrogative noun of accident, so it's going to be answered with an adjective noun. We ask how many, and the answer is going to be a number, because we're talking about multitudes. How many units are contained in the multitude? So when we ask how many, quote, the answer is going to be some number. unus, one, duo, two, tres, three. So the question quote asks about a multitude and is answered with a number, and numbers are adjectives. Quantus asks about a magnitude and is going to be answered with some adjective of size or length or width. All right, next, quotus, quotus, quotus. Quotus asks a question about order or rank. Okay, so if I said quotus, it would mean like what, in what place? In what place is this? In what order is this? All right, quotus. And the answers are going to be adjectives that describe place or order. So if I ask quotus, in what place? An answer could be primus, first, secundus, second, tertius, third, and so on, and so on. Okay, so quotus, in what place or in what order. Then we have the adjective example, or the interrogative noun cuya, cuya. This, you see here, has cuyus, cuya, cuyum. These are three genders, as I explained before. This interrogative noun is translated as whose, whose. If you expect the answer to be masculine, then you would use cuyus. If it's expected to be feminine, you would use cuya. And if it was expected to be neuter, or if you were not sure of what the gender would be, and you were just asking without any reference to the gender, you would use cuyum. And this means whose. Okay, so here we have an example. Cuya vestis. Vestis is a feminine noun. Cuya vestis means whose clothing. Whose clothing. And then we have examples of two pronouns and one substantive noun in a genitive case as an answer. So whose clothing is this? The answer could be mea, mine. Or it could be tua, yours. Now, mea and tua are pronouns, but they act like adjectives. And that's why, again, I said the use of this word adjectives needs to be loose. We need to understand what this can mean in different contexts. We could be talking very specifically about adjective nouns, but we could also just be talking about words which are used to modify understood or expressed substantives. They could all be referred to as adjectives. So here we see cuya is an interrogative noun of accident to be answered with an adjective, and yet we find a pronoun because this pronoun mea acts like an adjective noun. It means my. Tua means your. And then cesaris, cesaris is actually, as we'll learn, the genitive case of the substantive noun Caesar. So it's like saying it's Caesar's clothing. Okay? So that's an example of cuya being used here. Cuya vestis, mea, tua, cesaris. All right? And then lastly, the last example that Alvarez gives us for interrogative nouns of accident is cuyas. Cuyas, which is a different noun. So don't get cuyas confused with cuyus, cuya, cuyum. They look obviously very similar, but this is something different. It means whose. Whose are you from? Or we can use the word whence. Whence. Where are you from? Okay? And we'll see a few examples that show what exactly it means. So if we say cuyas es, it means whence are you? Where are you from? One answer could be Italus. Italus. I am from Italy. Another could be Romanus, or Italus would better be translated as Italian. Okay? Romanus, Roman. Stoicus means stoic, means I am from the Stoic school of philosophy. Okay? Whose are you? I'm Italian, I'm Roman, I'm Stoic. So cuias is another example of an interrogative noun of accident. So here in part 1, as I said, we're going to study interrogative nouns. We learned what an interrogative noun is generally. An interrogative noun is a noun which we ask concerning something, such as who, which, or how much. We learned that there are 2 kinds of interrogative nouns, an interrogative noun of substance and an interrogative noun of accident. Interrogative nouns of substance are answered with substantive nouns or demonstrative pronouns. Interrogative nouns of accident are answered with adjective nouns. Okay? Or, as we saw here, pronouns that even substantive nouns in cases that act like adjective nouns. Okay? So I've mentioned a few times now that the use of the word adjective needs to be used loosely with an understanding of its different possible meanings. Okay? So for part 1, that's everything that we need to talk about in this video. You have the written content of the lesson in your course page, which I encourage you to go now and study carefully for mastery. There may be a little more detail in there, but that should provide you with a good introduction to this first question of interrogative pronouns in lesson 5 on the various classes of adjectives. All right? I hope that's helpful. God bless your study.